Hello and welcome to, the next season of A Girls Podcast with your host Jasmine Rule. Today we are discussing the election results by request from one of my frequent commenters, Maria Stark. So, you might have heard about the Swedish elections and sort of the turn from left-wing politics to right-wing politics. And I'm here to talk a little bit about what this actually means, what the election results really mean, and also discussing potentially why there's been a big change politically, and also some of the things that I personally am surprised about in regards to the elections. So first of all, it looks like there's going to be a right-wing bloc that'll be in control of the government, and this is because in Sweden it's multi-member proportional system like New Zealand, so parties need to work together in order to secure a majority so that they can rule. So when people talk about the Swedish Democrats, who are considered the racist party in Swedish politics and that they have the highest percentage of votes, that doesn't mean that they rule outright. So they have to form a coalition with other parties that are centre-right in order to form a government and take power and rule the country. So this can kind of be a little bit confusing because you might hear news stories about like Sweden has turned to far-right politics and those sorts of headlines. But in reality, we don't really know like what the political landscape is going to be like going forward, because when these parties do make their coalitions, they have to discuss with each other what things they are actually going to do, what things they wouldn't even consider, and so basically they have to bargain with each other. So it's a bit misleading to say that Sweden is going into far-right politics because we actually don't know. We don't know what policies that all the different parties are going to agree on, and that's going to take some time. It could possibly take a few months to actually figure out how the government is going to look like, and if certain parties don't like the way that things are going, they could even decide to work with the left-wing parties and form a majority there. So I think it can be quite misleading to see the news article titles that we see. So I just want to make it clear that we actually don't really know how the government, like how far right the government is going to be, and like what policies are actually going to be a focus in the coming years. So that part is out of the way. The second part is the surprising increase in the Swedish Democrats. So back about 12 years ago, when they first started getting votes, they only had a very small percentage, like barely enough to get a seat in government, so like 5%. And over the years, they have increasingly become more and more popular. So now they actually have the highest percentage in the right-wing bloc. And that's quite interesting really to see, because you would consider them to be quite a new political party. 2010, like 12 years, that's a very short time to become quite popular. And even more surprisingly is that amongst young voters, 18 to 21, they have quite a large percentage of younger voters voting for them. So this has actually been a surprise for a lot of people, because usually people consider younger voters to be more left-leaning, and part of the reason why they might have increased their percentage of votes is that they have made efforts to distance themselves from some really extreme members in their party. So certain members have been kicked out, and I think that has kind of been a way for them to say, we aren't neo-Nazis, and the people who are presenting themselves as neo-Nazis, we're gonna kick them out. So I think that has helped sanitize their image a wee bit, but honestly, I really am not entirely sure how they have managed to increase their percentages. So it would be really interesting to find out why people have voted for them and what might have encouraged them to vote for them when they would have voted for a different party in the past. And that brings me to my next point about Swedish politics, and that is I think what has harmed the left bloc quite a bit, which is that it's been very difficult for people who are interested in the policies that the Swedish Democrats have put forward. It's been difficult for them to openly discuss that because there's been like a big taboo around voting for right-wing political parties, which it makes sense because if you're talking about sort of racism and issues of immigration, it can easily sort of become this like racist discussion that people don't want to have. However, I think that the left bloc has really damaged themselves by having this culture of not talking about these things, because it means that people in the left bloc, the ministers in the left bloc, they're not hearing why people are interested in voting for right-wing parties. So they kind of have to guess, and that's not really going to be very successful, because some of the policies that a right-wing party might have could actually be adopted by the left party, and that could encourage people who are considering voting for the right to vote for the left instead. But if they're not talking about it, then they don't know the policies that they might be able to adopt themselves to encourage more votes for them. So honestly, I really think that aspect has caused the left bloc to shoot themselves in the foot. Like, don't ask, don't tell. It's not really a good idea. So now, I guess for the last part is talking about why people would want to vote for the right wing, even though I don't know, just trying to think of the possibilities why. And I would say that there is actually kind of a reason for a lot of different people to vote for right-wing politicians, like even people who are asylum seekers or immigrants. I think that they also have a reason potentially to vote for the right wing. So in Sweden at the moment and in the past, there's been sort of like gang violence and violence that has been really weird, like people throwing grenades and like explosions and things that are really kind of difficult to understand, like who's going around throwing grenades, it's really weird. But that sort of violence, it's like being committed, I think, a lot from immigrants, and then it's been committed against immigrants. So like if you're an immigrant or an asylum seeker, you kind of are interested in policies that are hard on crime because you're being affected by these, explosions and gun violence. So in that sort of way, the right wing can actually get votes from people who you would just assume would vote for the left because they're easier on immigration and asylum seeker policies. So I think that could possibly be a reason that those sorts of people might vote for the right wing. And then if you look at people who have been born in Sweden and grown up in Sweden, I wonder if there's something happening in the schools where the influx of like asylum seekers, I wonder if the younger people are kind of seeing this influx as quite stressful, or that there's a sense of unease or concern, or I just wonder how things look like for Swedish kids when they're at school, and then a lot of asylum seekers or immigrants arrive in the country, and then they start going to school, but they struggle with Swedish. I wonder if there's something about that could be influencing younger people to vote right wing. Obviously, since I haven't been in the Swedish school system, I don't know. But I have heard from some immigrants who moved to Sweden when they were teenagers and they went to a Swedish school. They found it really difficult because they didn't know Swedish yet. So, and that kind of really surprised me. Because I never really even thought about that. Like, wow, that would be so weird to arrive in a different country and then to try and go to school when you don't know the language, and like you don't know, you have no friends, like you don't have a lot of like family and stuff. So I wonder if there's sort of a chaos that kind of happens that might put younger Swedish voters off voting for the left. And then the last thing that I think is an issue that encourages some Swedish people to vote for the right, and that would be that it's really difficult if you have someone who is from like a Muslim country or something like that. It's really difficult to bring up issues that arise from the things that they do or say. So for example, at my work, we had a guy, a Muslim guy, and there was that beheading in France from the teacher who allegedly set fire to the Quran, or no, he didn't do that. He showed an image of Muhammad, and he was beheaded because of that. And this Muslim guy at work, he said, like, well, you know, people should expect that to happen if they're gonna be, you know, disrespecting Islam and showing images of Muhammad. And I personally was extremely upset about that. Like, I called him out on it, and then I actually started crying, and I had to leave because it just disgusted me so much that he would say that somebody deserves to die because, you know, they disrespected your religion. You know, like, I probably disrespect, you know, Christians all the time, you know, but I'm not afraid that they're gonna, you know, behead me, right? So, and it's difficult to bring up those issues because, you know, when I go to my boss about the things that he's done, you know, he set up cameras illegally and things like that, like, they just brush it off as like, oh, well, you know, like, that's just what he's like, you know, like, he's a little bit crazy, you know, but it's not okay at all, you know. And personally, in those sorts of situations, I think, you know, I personally feel like zero tolerance, you know, like, people shouldn't be subjected to that sort of aggression, or, I mean, because it kind of ends up being like a threat of violence from himself, you know, like, what's he gonna do if we say something about Islam that he doesn't like? So I think there's issues about that where there's just no repercussions. I think that's what I'm getting at, is that it's really difficult to have repercussions against people who are inappropriate like that. So those are my thoughts behind it. One last thing that I was really surprised about, and that was the lack of talking about climate change, because when I vote, I am really interested in policies that are going to help reduce the effects of climate change, but like, there was hardly any parties talking about that at all, and that really, really surprised me, because when you think about Greta Thunberg and all the work that she's done, you would think that especially younger voters would be really interested in voting for policies that seem to be helping mitigate the climate change and all of that, but there really wasn't much talk about that. And I think that also negatively affected the left bloc, because, you know, when I'm voting, I'm like, well, you know, who, like, is anybody taking up this issue? Like, who am I going to vote for? You know, so instead, it was just like trying to figure out, well, then who's going to, you know, who has the social values that I want to vote for. So I'm really surprised about that, honestly. But that's going to be it for this video. You guys probably have a lot of questions and opinions, so you can write those in the comments and I will try and answer it. I don't know a ton about Swedish politics, honestly, and a lot of this is speculation, but like I said, there's kind of a culture about you're not really allowed to talk about some things, which does make it really difficult. But I hope I did a good enough job. I hope you understand the Swedish elections a little bit more, and that it will take some time to actually find out how right-wing the government is going to be and what policies they're actually going to pursue. Thank you for watching. I'm glad that you're here. I will see you next time. Hej då!